This is a clip from the stubbornly provocative Iranian filmmaker JAFAR PANAI's sixth film, This Is Not a Film.
ببین اینو میگفتم الانم من فکر میکنم که همین شرایطه واقعا این شرایط البته واسه من هستش همون اتفاقی که واسه مینا افتاد یعنی منم به نوعی باید این گچو بندازم بیرون.
This film was made in 2011 whilst he was under house arrest, and in order to get the film out of Iran it was smuggled out of the country on a USB that was in a cake.
اینو داره دروغ در میاد و به نوعی خود من نیستم.
So we've just seen a clip from JAFAR PANAI's 2011 film, This Is Not a Film, and he stopped play acting in the film, and he says he's Mina, and he's referring there to a character in a film that he made 14 years previously called The Mirror. And in that film, a very young child is waiting at school for her mother to come and pick her up, and her mother doesn't turn up, and so she's got to make her way back home in Tehran. And midway through the shooting, she removes this plaster that she's got on her arm, and she says, "That's it. I don't want to carry on." And the rest of the film becomes a documentary. PANAI decided to carry on filming this actress who decided she doesn't want to carry on. And in This Is Not a Film, he says the same thing, and he says, "That's it. I can't carry on pretending." And so he breaks down at that point. It's very important that PANAI refers back to the mirror in This Is Not a Film because it is a moment where things switch from fiction to documentary. There's both a tradition in Iranian filmmaking of being quite vague about whether it's documentary or fiction and mixing the two. Mahmal Baf, the apple, is another classic example. So the apple was about two young girls who had been locked into their house. They weren't allowed to go out by their family, and social workers had found out. The girls had been in there for many years. The film actually used the same actresses and retold that story. When you know that they're actually the children who were imprisoned, it has a very different, you're not watching it as a fictional film, even though there's a sort of narrative that's fictional. JAFAR PANAI was born in 1960, and he was initiated into cinema to an extent with his sisters, who were not allowed to watch films, but they would ask their brother to tell them about the films that he'd seen, and so he would have to reenact scenes, and so it was there from a young age. But he actually began filmmaking when he was in the army, and he was an army cinematographer. And then when he came back, it was during the Iran-Iraq War, and when he came back to Tehran, he enrolled in film school. And in film school, he was inspired by Abbas Kiarostami, an Iranian filmmaker who was 20 years older than him, and was already making very interesting films, and was an inspiration to younger generation. And PANAI got in touch with him and asked if he could be an assistant on one of his films. So Kiarostami took him on, and he was an assistant for Through the Olive Trees. And in that film, we can see shots of PANAI, a young PANAI, sort of behind the camera and directing various things. And so that was his first experience. We have a kind of double narrative, and it does tell you quite a lot about filmmaking, because you see shots breaking down and scenes breaking down, and the camera crew and how they have to sort of deal with problems and various issues and the conversations people have, but then also the other story that they're trying to tell is the fictional story. Shortly after PANAI worked with Kiarostami, Kiarostami had encouraged PANAI to make his own feature films, and so PANAI did begin with what's quite a classic theme in Iranian cinema, which is to use children because children are a way of getting around the censors. It's a sort of a softer subject. And so he began with a film called The White Balloon, which involves two young children. And again, with the mirror, we have the young child as the protagonist. When Panahi made The Circle in 2000 about the oppression of women in current-day Tehran, that would be the first of his films to be banned. Thereafter, every film by Panahi has been banned and has not been shown in Iran. And he's always refused to make any so-called corrections which have been required of him from the censors. He's always said, I will never change a single shot from my film, and that sort of intransigence has naturally caused him problems. His films after The Circle, Crimson Gold and then Offside, were equally banned. They were not necessarily as provocative as The Circle in a way, but they all deal with social issues in Tehran. Crimson Gold, which was also censored. This one follows a pizza delivery man who is slightly unstable. This is what filmmaking is about. It's about people taking you by surprise. And so I think that his choice of an actor who was not necessarily a classic actor who would be able to pretend to be disturbed, to actually pick someone who was a little bit disturbed, was something that he liked, that sort of uncertainty. And the film does have that kind of quality of you don't quite know what this guy's going to do next. Even though you follow him and you like him, you don't quite feel comfortable with him. In 2009, Panahi was making a film about the Green Movement and the presidential election in Iran, and he was making this without a government permit. And he was arrested. There was a raid on his apartment, and he was working with a documentary filmmaker at the time who, in fact, is the cameraman on This Is Not a Film. And then he was put in jail, and he went on hunger strike, and eventually he was released, but he was put under house arrest afterwards, and he's been banned from making films for 20 years. The house arrest and the problems that he's had has had a sort of paradoxical effect on his filmmaking, and he has become more productive since the rate of filmmaking has gone up. It's not necessarily the films that he would have chosen to make, but when you see them, they're undeniably Panahi films. His most recent film is called Taxi. He's driving around the city of Tehran in a taxi, and he's put a camera on the dashboard, and he brings passengers into his car, and progressively we learn about sort of various problems in Tehran today. For example, a lawyer comes into his car and gives quite a passionate speech about freedom of speech, and subsequently she's been imprisoned. JAFAR Panahi is probably one of the most high-profile Iranian filmmakers working at the moment alongside Kiarostami, and I think the problems that he's had has only raised his profile internationally. In 2014, the new President Rouhani issued a statement at a film festival in Iran about bringing estranged audiences back to the movie theatres, and he made comments that sounded quite positive, as though there might be some kind of relaxation in the censorship laws. Panahi issued quite a long response, but he ended with the following comment. Time and time again, the authorities have sent such repetitive messages to filmmakers. These have not only not been helpful, but they have played a major role in driving audiences away from the movie theatres. It would be far better for Mr. Rouhani to promise that he will remain faithful to at least 1% of the promises he made during the elections, and that, with prudence if not with hope, he will not try to establish a new system of censorship.